This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. And today we're going to continue our journey through Genealogy Standards, second edition revised, with standard number 45. Probably one of my favorite standards because it will be the one that will get you in the most trouble of any of them, probably. Standard number 45 is assumptions. As they obtain evidence, genealogists recognize their assumptions, categorize them, and differentially address each kind of assumption. The first is fundamental assumptions. These are concepts generally accepted as true. For example, people did not act after their deaths or before their births. Travel between places is consistent with the period's technology. Genealogists incorporate fundamental assumptions into their reasoning. The second is valid assumptions. Valid assumptions are concepts gradually accepted as true unless convincingly contradicted. For example, mothers between 12 and 49 years old conceive children, personal behavior and life patterns are coherent, people generally observe the legal, moral, and social standards of their time and place. Genealogists seek evidence to invalidate such assumptions. If they cannot find such evidence, they incorporate the assumptions into their reasoning. And thirdly, unsound assumptions are concepts that may be valid but cannot be accepted without supporting evidence. For example, a man's widow was the mother of his children, migrating families followed popular routes, a bride's surname is that of her parents. Genealogists seek evidence to support such assumptions. If they find it, the assumption becomes valid. If they cannot find supporting evidence, they do not incorporate the unsound assumption into their reasoning. See glossary for definition of evidence. Please remember that I do not represent the Board for Certification of Genealogists and that this is just my opinion on the matter, and it could be worth just squat. So basically, we have three kinds of assumptions. Those that we can live with, like there was a civil war. Well, fundamental assumptions basically are not a problem because they tend to be common knowledge. They're not necessarily assumptions. You can't give birth to a child before you yourself are born, that kind of thing. And we miss this many times because we aren't paying attention. You just don't know how many ancestry family trees are out there where a child is born when the mother is 5 or something very similar. Or a child is born in my own family. For many years in the genealogy, a child was described as being the son of Woodson Parsons and Mary Parsons, and Nancy Ann Mosby Parsons, actually. And there was one child of that marriage, Mary Parsons, and there was Elizabeth Parsons. And then there was a Gustav Adolphus Parsons. And this third child was actually born 2 years after Woodson Parsons died. Yet you can find out on the web some Woodson Parsons' grandson, Mosby Monroe Parsons, was a unconfirmed major general in the Confederate Army, and his father's identified as Adolphus Parsons, and Adolphus Parsons is identified as the son of Woodson Parsons, and Woodson died 2 years before he was born. And to be honest, I didn't know when Adolphus was born. So I assumed, as did everybody else, that this was the case. And then I found a equity court case where the two sisters were suing Adolphus because he wanted all of his portion of the estate, the 1/3, when the mother died. And they were saying, no, they weren't entitled to Woodson Parsons' piece of their mother's estate, just their mother's piece. So you have to watch those assumptions, and we have to pay attention to things like, oh my God, dates. Now, the second piece rather, the valid assumptions. These are things which are generally accepted as true unless we can find some way to contradict them. And maybe it is our job to contradict them. For example, mothers between 12 and 49 years old conceive children. Well, people after 49 years of age conceive children also on occasion. Personal behavior and life patterns are coherent. People generally observe legal, moral, and social standards of their time and place. Well, if that was truly the case all the time, genealogy wouldn't be as much fun as it actually is. because it's when people are illegal, immoral, and antisocial, sometimes it's the way we learn the most about them, because people report their behaviors in places like courts and newspapers and diaries and those kind of places. So in this case, these could be valid assumptions if we're able to actually find the evidence that these things in fact occurred. And as genealogists, this is something that we love doing. Now, unsound assumptions, the third ones, are those that may be valid but cannot be accepted without supporting evidence. Now, notice that this is different than the valid assumptions, and that valid assumptions, these are, you're trying to find contradictions. Whereas in the unsound assumptions, you're trying to find supporting evidence. So you get the same set of circumstances. A man's widow was the mother of his children. Migrating families followed popular routes. Well, I always break out my Burpee seed catalog, and that may be the first place I go to figure out where somebody came from. And many times, my Kingman family is a perfect example, and my Hawes family also, of being able to trace a family from Wisconsin through northern Ohio into Tioga County, New York, into Litchfield, Connecticut, and into some town in Massachusetts. Goshen would be the town. And so sometimes these unsound assumptions actually can be proven to be correct, because in fact, that migration pattern, in fact, is exactly what the Burpee Seed Catalog temperate zone map says that it should be. The fact that a bride's surname is that of her parents, well, it may be, but she may have also been married one other time before, or three. You just have to make sure that you're able to come up with that supporting evidence. I think assumptions are things that get you in trouble. They're also, although it's not covered in this standard, there are other assumptions. There are assumptions that we make about records, whether we will find something in them or not. And that's just something that you have to learn to deal with. You want to be careful that you aren't so knowledgeable of something that you ignore it because you believe what you need to find you can't find there, for example. Our assumptions can sometimes make us stumble, but recognize that these three, don't you love it? These fundamental assumptions, valid assumptions, and unsound assumptions are all things that we have to deal with in our genealogical endeavors. So this is Craig. This has been Just Genealogy. And I'm hoping that you'll notice that my background is different. I'm in a place where the Wi-Fi is not as good as I would like it to be. And so I may freeze a little bit, but hopefully my voice will come through. And I will see you all soon.